tries to tell you that every corner of the Earth has been explored, they're wrong. Since the dawn of human thought, there have been reports of monsters, giants, ogres, fire-breathing dragons, and dinosaurs still walking the Earth. Since the mid-20th century, the infant science of cryptozoology has stalked these phenomena and gradually found out what is true and what is false about these monsters and myths. Many people believe that the life forms in every corner of the Earth have been fully catalogued. As early as the beginning of the 20th century, scientists had already proudly announced that all living creatures had been discovered. Today, we know that's not even remotely true. In this past century, more animals have been discovered than ever before. Sensational successes are still reported today, and not only in the microcosmic arena. Scientists believe that there are still genuine undiscovered giants in the deep sea, in the jungles, and mountain ranges. How much of these stories about still surviving monsters, giants, fire-breathing dragons, hairy human-like creatures, and dinosaurs are true? Renowned scientists the world over are going hunting to lift the veil on the secrets of these fantastic creatures and terrible monsters still living on Earth. And then suddenly a monster stood in front of me.
It's incredible to think that these creatures are still out there.
I'm estimating about 2,000 of them.
And this big black mass, I call it, came right up out of the water.
The beginning of modern zoology in the 18th century also marked the beginning of many large-scale discoveries in the animal kingdom. Researchers encountered things that they had never thought possible. Today, the latest and most controversial discipline of zoology is called cryptozoology. Cryptozoologists take stories of legendary creatures quite seriously. They are convinced that there is at least a tiny bit of truth in all fairy tales and legends. They float through the coal-black void like ominous messengers from a terrible underworld. Long fangs, elastic stomachs, and jaws that unhinge give their victims no chance at all. More than 2/3 of the Earth is covered with water, a gigantic living space almost completely inaccessible to us. As little as 100 years ago, people believed that there was no possibility of life in these eternal depths.
Human beings have covered a great deal of the surface of the land in the planet. There are obviously great areas of the Amazon rainforest that have not been explored. There are areas of the Asian deserts, like the Gobi Desert, that have not been explored. There are areas of the Himalayas that have not been explored. But I still believe that if we're going to find something new and surprising, it will be found in the ocean.
1964 marks the starting point for deep-sea research. The submarine Alvin enters the water for the first time. Since then, the deep sea has continually challenged scientists and researchers. This realm, which so many people considered void of life, is actually teeming with surprises. These are what are known as tube worms, creatures that have neither mouths nor intestines. In order to survive, they let bacteria live in their bodies and receive nourishment in return. With each new expedition comes new information. Millions of deep-sea crabs feast on the hot vapors of deep-sea springs. Or the black smokers. Reaching heights of more than 30 feet, they jut out of the ocean floor like smokestacks. They develop when the Earth's tectonic plates shift and ice-cold water encounters glowing magma from the Earth's interior. Scientists believe life originated here, where conditions are similar to those that prevailed more than 3 billion years ago. Scientists are meticulously combing the ocean floor, seeking an exact idea of what lives here. Sometimes the search is interrupted. Here, researchers are faced with the spectacle of human tragedy, a product of the arrogance bred by our technology. Suddenly, a creature emerges from the darkness. Experiences like these may remind one of Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Quote, "My blood froze in my veins as I recognized what kind of creatures these were. Two gigantic sharks with enormous fins and glassy, expressionless eyes. We could clearly see the phosphorescent material leaking from the corners around their mouths. They looked like monstrous glowworms who could crush a man with their iron-like jaws. And I observed their silver bellies and gigantic ravenous mouths not only as a scientist, but also as a potential victim." So wrote Jules Verne. The question arises, not without a slight shudder, what other giants lurk in the canyons of the deepest sea? For instance, between Japan and Indonesia, right in the area of the Mariana Trench, the lowest point on Earth. Off the Japanese coast, in Suruga Bay, bait is being anchored to the bottom of the sea. Here, deep-sea sharks are drawn by the scent. Suddenly, something unexpected happens. A colossus pushes into the camera's view. A monster of unbelievable dimensions. Not a whale, but a shark. And what a giant! The scientists are speechless. Sharks this size, such as the whale shark or the giant shark, are known to inhabit the surface of the ocean. However, this giant is swimming 4,000 feet below other members of his species. Investigators determine that it's a sleeper shark with a length of over 30 feet. A sleeper shark is the largest species of shark known at this time. Up to now, people know little about this Goliath of the deep. It's been hidden in the eternal night of the deep sea for millions of years. In 1858, the Canadian fishermen Squires and Picot reported the following. Was it a decaying fish? Was it a giant jellyfish? Or what was it? Squires poked into the jelly-like mass with a boat hook to study it further. And suddenly, in a fraction of a second, a tentacle shot out of the water. Squires was terrified. What is the truth of these tales of a giant squid? Wednesday, June 10th, 1998. An aeroplane approaches New York's Kennedy Airport. It's already traveled around half the world. It took off in Auckland, New Zealand, and made a quick stop in Los Angeles before it landed in New York. And now, everything's got to go very fast. Every minute counts. At the same time, on a rooftop terrace in Manhattan, not far from Central Park, the film 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is being screened. The freight, now loaded into a truck, is going on what will hopefully be a short trip. In the back of this truck, there is a real beast. On the day of its departure from New Zealand, the Wellington Post ran the headline, "Squidzilla Conquers New York." Indeed, a 25-foot-long giant squid is now on its way to the giant metropolis. The beast has been traveling in a deep freeze, and now the priceless freight is threatening to thaw out. That would be a terrible loss. The audience on the rooftop terrace does not know that at the same time, a genuine sea monster, though it has never been seen alive, is actually rolling over the George Washington Bridge into the heart of New York City. This is 85th Street at the corner of Central Park West, the loading dock of the American Museum of Natural History. The story of Captain Nemo, a man as cruel as he is fascinating, and his submarine Nautilus was written in 1870 by Jules Verne. What triggered this story was an increasing number of reports published from 1866 on that a gigantic monster inhabiting the oceans of the world made ships disappear without a trace. But in Verne's story, the reason for the ship's disappearances was not a monster, but a wonder of technology, the Nautilus, a submarine captained by a man intoxicated with power. After many wild and reckless underwater adventures, there is a final decisive struggle between man and the gigantic beast. Today, this novel is a classic of the science fiction genre. But today in New York, real-life history is being written. Octopus history.
For the first time ever, I touched a giant squid. I could touch the tentacles, and what's particularly fabulous are the suckers on the tentacles and the arms, these large suckers surrounded by sharp little teeth. And in fact, when it was first defrosted, you could press your hands onto the suckers and there would be suction. It would not release you. So it was still a very powerful suction. And it was just a thrill to touch it for the very first time.
Actually, we know little about these deep-sea monsters. The first studies soon produced surprises. Contrary to early reports that the squid was a baby at a length of just under 25 feet, this monster is, in fact, an adult male. The scientists working with Neil Landman now assume that only the females are the true giant squids.
For many people, a giant squid is something that lives in deep water. We know virtually nothing about its life history, you know, how long it takes to grow, when it reaches maturity. So in many ways, it's an icon for the deep oceans. You know, here is this animal, the largest living invertebrate. We have never even filmed it. There's no record of it, you know, swimming around. So I think it really symbolizes the kinds of animals, wondrous animals that live on our planet, of which we know so little.
What little we do know about the giant squid comes from the few dead specimens that have washed ashore around the world. Fish and smaller squid that live at depths between 3,000 and 9,000 feet have been found in their digestive tracts. It seems giant squid prefer habitats with strong currents, such as those in certain areas of the Atlantic and Pacific. Another important clue is provided by the sperm whale. The giant squid is a staple of the sperm whale's menu. The sperm whale's hunting grounds are off the Atlantic and Pacific coasts of various countries, and it is possible to narrow in on it even more tightly, to the waters around New Zealand. In Washington, D.C., this information is of great interest. In the capital's Smithsonian Institution, Clyde Roper is regarded as the world's foremost authority on giant squid. Roper has undertaken a number of expeditions hunting these giants of the oceans. His last was in New Zealand. The expensive expedition, however, ended without the desired results. To this day, no one has ever seen a live giant squid.
Here we have an illustration of how these animals capture their prey, then hang on with the arms, bite with the sharp, powerful beaks, swallow the food where it's digested, and then the waste products come out. Now, we don't know exactly how this happens with giant squid, but we do know that they must be very efficient because they grow very big and they grow very fast.
At the Smithsonian Institution's permanent exhibition, In Search of Giant Squid, the visitor has the unique opportunity to marvel at the giant Architeuthis, the largest invertebrate animal in the world. Its eyes are the largest in the animal kingdom. At about 10 inches in diameter, they are the size of volleyballs. Architeuthis has 10 arms. 8 of them are as thick as fire hoses and studded with plate-sized suckers. The other 2 are long and slender. They are the tentacles, the giant squid's real weapons. Most of Roper's studies use the giant squid's cousin, the octopus.
Here we've removed the beak so that we can see how big they are in comparison to the rest of the animal. And in fact, this is a nice size, sort of average size squid. And for the size of the animal, the beaks are actually quite small. So you can imagine when we find beaks that are as big as a fist or bigger than your fist together, we can imagine how big the squid must have been to have beaks that are many, many times larger than this. They come from large squid, the giant squid that lives in the deep sea. And a squid that size with beaks that big surely must feed on whatever it wants to feed on. There aren't any animals, perhaps, except the sperm whale itself, that would be able to escape the grasp of these jaws and beaks. When these animals actually capture their prey, there's no hope for the prey. They are captured for good. No escape.
What we would actually see, were we to look at this creature face to face, would hardly differ from the old seafarers' descriptions. It's a frightening sight. Its head is covered with thorns. Its eyes are gigantic. Its eyeballs measure a yard across. It is a monster. The giant squid pumps water into its body like the octopus, then shoots it out through its jet. This crab is prey in the relentless struggle for survival. The crab doesn't stand a chance. 8 tentacles wrap him tightly. The sharp beak does the rest. Octopuses are not even afraid of humans.
The animal attacked me and bit me right through my wetsuit, right through my bathing suit, and right through my dive skins, and bit me in the leg. And it was a very, very powerful bite, and cut right through the skin after going through all that material. So I had quite a bite, and I was very, very happy that there were not a lot of squid biting me at the same time, because the Humboldt squid, in fact, have been known to attack and kill and eat people.
What if a giant squid were actually to attack? It's a horrifying thought. These are the risks of the cryptozoologist. The creatures he researches are often anything but harmless, whether it be the giant squid or the elusive Yeti. People may spend years searching for them, but the idea of actually standing eye to eye with such exotic creatures is a challenge that defines the ultimate goal of the cryptozoologist. But a scientist does not need to cast his nets miles deep into the ocean in order to bring unknown creatures to light. One of the most important tasks of the natural scientist is to locate and classify the many varieties of species living on Earth. According to scientists' latest estimates, anywhere from 10 to 100 million living creatures are still waiting to be discovered. All in all, only 1.7 million animals, plants, mushrooms, and microorganisms have been catalogued. That is surprising if you consider that in the 70s, biologists proudly declared that, to a great extent, all life forms had finally been discovered. But shortly after this announcement, the American researcher Terry Irwin investigated treetops in the rainforests of South America. He got amazing results. In the leaves of a single species of tree, 1,200 different species of beetles and insects were crawling over one another. Most of them were simply unknown to researchers. Biologists were rudely awakened from their smug slumber. Now, scientists are striving anew to record the entire biological variety of the Earth. Most of the potential discoveries are at the microcosmic level. Still, from time to time, the discovery of completely unknown mammals indicates that there are more such creatures awaiting detection. Since 1992, scientists have been scouring the forests of Vietnam for an unknown species of cattle. They first heard about it from local residents. The rumors were later confirmed with the aid of a DNA analysis carried out on bone shards from dead specimens. Not until 1994 did researchers find a living Vu Quang cow as proof. It stood 3 feet high at the shoulders and weighed 220 pounds. Since the panda bear was discovered in 1869, it has been fighting for survival. It has become a symbol for all living creatures threatened with extinction. It even has a lobby working to protect it. But what about all the other animals, especially those that have not yet been discovered? The search for specimens that have perhaps survived in some far-off place is another task for cryptozoologists. Every child has a story about an animal that was saved from a dire fate. This one is a hairy, yellowish-gold creature with 2 long protruding teeth. It makes its home in many children's rooms throughout the world. It was catalogued for the first time by the zoologist, Professor Israel Aharoni. He was reading in an old Hebrew document about a mouse from Syria. It was described as a gentle domestic animal that was kept in a cage by children. Professor Aharoni did not know of any such mouse that fit that description. He became curious and started searching for it. In April of 1930, he actually found it in Syria, a female with 11 babies. He was able to bring 9 of the animals back to his laboratory. Of these 9, 5 ran away, 1 died, and 3 remained. Fortunately, it was 2 females and 1 male, probably the last of their species. Within a very short period of time, there were babies. Professor Aharoni then sent the babies to zoos and institutes all over the world. The result is that the family tree of every golden hamster alive today began in 1930 and can be traced back to this single mother and her 11 babies. The methods of the cryptozoologist often have less to do with dry scientific classification than with criminology. Through tireless work, the originators of cryptozoology gathered and archived stories and tales from native and indigenous sources from all corners of the planet. These stories often feature living creatures that left the Earth many millions of years ago. Every creature constantly on guard to fend off the attacks of the others. Today, more and more details are becoming known about the way these beings live together. Scientists are putting together these traces of the past to bring these giants of prehistoric time back to life today. 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs suddenly died out in a geological instant. For a long time, scientists have been arguing about why a species that was so successful for such a long time suddenly became extinct. The latest scientific studies confirm the thesis that the cataclysmic impact of an enormous meteorite caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. Within seconds after the bombardment from outer space, the Earth was buried in smoke and ash. An icy winter broke out, lasting many years. Over 80% of animal and plant life was annihilated forever. But was it in fact forever? Might there not still be undiscovered places where dinosaurs have survived? scientists and fanatics have organized expeditions to the cloud-covered Tapui Mountains in Venezuela in hope of finding a dinosaur said to be surviving there. Or to the Likuala swamps in the Congo. The German Congo explorer Stein zu Lausnitz described a monster known to locals as Mokele Mbembe. According to them, it's a lizard measuring more than 35 feet. At the end of 1981, the biologists Roy Mackle and Richard Greenwell went to search for the gigantic lizard in the remote swamp area. They came up empty-handed. But some people cling to a belief in living dinosaurs.
I could see something moving in the water, and the water was very, very still. There was just a lot of movement in that one spot.
June 30th, 1985, I took a video of Champ as it passed near buoy number 5 at Scotch Bonnet in Fairsburg, Vermont.
There have been many sightings here. I really believe that there is something there.
And this big black mass, I call it, came right up out of the water.
This is the place where the creature just described has been sighted. A small bay next to the rustic town of Port Henry on the banks of Lake Champlain, Vermont. The search for Champ, the monster, is comparable to the stories of the Loch Ness Monster. Champ was first mentioned in 1609, and the stories have not stopped since. Cryptozoologists are also interested in this creature. One of the most important sightings dates back to 1977. It is July 5th, and Sandra Mancy is picnicking with her family on the banks of the lake. Suddenly, Mancy hears a strange noise in the water. Keeping a cool head, she jumps to her feet, grabs her camera, and starts to take still shots. Her photograph triggers an all-out hunt for Champ. After this photograph was published, many people reported having sighted the monster.
It must have been maybe 20, 25 feet long.
It's large, black. Couldn't tell if it was scaly. It was shiny and bumpy, like a pickle.
To me, it's very intriguing to have a mystery, and it doesn't bother me not to know exactly what's there.
I think it's an ancient dinosaur. I like to think it's what they call a plesiosaurus, or an underwater brontosaurus with flippers. That's what I call it. That's what it reminded me of.
Dennis Hall, head of the initiative Champ Quest, is the most dedicated of the monster hunters. Like a lot of people in Lake Champlain, Hall grew up hearing about the creature affectionately known as Champy. Hall dedicates every free minute to the hunt for the gigantic creature. On June 30th, 1985, he had a breakthrough. That day, he rowed out onto the lake in his boat. He had binoculars, a video camera, and sonar instruments on board. Suddenly, he heard a noise. He scanned the water with his eyes and reached for his camera. As he peered through his viewfinder, he couldn't recognize anything. The lake was too choppy. Later on, he carefully examined his video footage and was convinced that he had caught Champ on film.
If I go too long without seeing this animal, I wonder, I question myself, am I looking for something real? But thinking back on the sightings and watching the videotape over again, you know, there definitely is an animal there. And seeing it is kind of like entering a dream. It'll change your outlook on life. It'll just make you realize that just about anything is possible. And the truth is stranger than fiction.
What is fiction and what is reality? One must decide for oneself. The state of Vermont has already erected a monument to Champ. It passed conservation laws to protect the unknown creature with the scientific name Belloa aquatica champlainiensis. Like a detective, the cryptozoologist must possess a wealth of ideas. be detail-oriented, and have a healthy imagination. If species such as turtles that existed in the dinosaur era have survived successfully on this Earth for millions of years, why shouldn't others, for example, dragons, be just as lucky? After all, stories from the Middle Ages are full of reports of such dragons, and it is only since the 18th century that we have known about the existence of dinosaurs. In 1912, some frightening creatures were discovered on the small island of Komodo, east of Bali. As early as 1908, people in Europe had heard about strange gigantic land crocodiles with voracious appetites. But nobody wanted to believe it. An expedition under the leadership of the Dutch governor Steyn van Hensbroek was able to confirm stories about these blood-curdling omnivores. Of course, they weren't crocodiles, and they weren't really giants either. They are the largest living lizard, called the Komodo dragon. Up to 12 feet in length, they apparently love to eat pigs, wild game, and given the chance, even people. Like the death-defying knights of the Middle Ages who carried out their legendary fights against fire-breathing dragons, two courageous Englishmen set out to battle a giant contemporary dragon. The Australian Aborigines know the animal as Mungun Gully. According to their mythology, the giant dragon still inhabits their lands. According to classical zoology, however, this giant lizard, called Megalania prisco, died out on the Australian continent more than 10,000 years ago. They say the Komodo dragon is a direct descendant of this ancient Australian giant. Jonathan Downes is the head of the English Centre for Fortean Zoology. He founded the institute in 1992 as a contact center for European cryptozoologists. His employees archive all information relevant to the field and make it available over the internet. It can be retrieved at any time, even tea time.
There you go, Johnny. Tea.
Thank you, my dear. England would not be England without tea.
Certainly.
Downes himself is an enthusiastic supporter of cryptozoology. He has searched for Nessie and other sea monsters. He's hunted giant felines in the English marshlands and gone searching for a vampire in South America. With his assistant, Richard Freeman, a former zookeeper and an expert in the field of reptiles, he is planning an ambitious expedition. Their objective is to follow the stories of the original Australian inhabitants and to check whether there is a grain of truth in the Aborigines' tales of the Mungun Gully, the fantastic lizard. But where should they begin looking? Australia is a vast and sparsely populated continent.
That is the animal that we'll be looking for. Megalania prisca.
Blimey. How big is it?
30 feet long, so that's 3 times as long and 16 times as heavy as the Komodo dragon.
One question then. If Australia is that big, how do we know we're going to be in the right place?
Well, with cryptozoology, as always, it's chance. You've got to be in the right time at the right place.
And what about domestic livestock? Do they attack sort of farm stock?
Yeah, they've been reported to attack cows, sheep, chickens.
But why hasn't anyone caught them then? I mean, if presumably most lizards are it's diurnal, right?
Yeah, it comes out in the day.
So most lizards are diurnal and it attacks domestic livestock. Why hasn't anyone ever caught one?
Well, there was a case of one killing dogs and chickens in 1978, and that was investigated by people from Brisbane University. Now, they actually went there and took casts of this creature's footprints, and the footprints, as far as I know, should still be at Brisbane University.
We've got to fly to Australia. We haven't got to fly to Australia. We've got to go upstairs to the office and have a word with Graham, because whenever it comes down to the nuts and bolts, that's his job.
Okay.
Preparations for the expedition begin. The latest information is researched over the internet. Emails are sent to the University of Brisbane concerning casts of footprints belonging to a monster measuring more than 30 feet. They contact their Australian colleagues and the Australian media. Are there, in fact, recent reports of encounters with this mysterious gigantic creature? How was it described?
Megalania prisca may have been behind the genesis of the original Chinese dragon myth. The Chinese apparently reached the Australian island far, far before the white man. There have been many artefacts found that seem to be Oriental in origin that predate white colonists, so it's tempting to suppose that this 30-foot long lizard with its flickering tongue was the original Chinese dragon.
Some say it all sounds a little far-fetched.
Of course I'm crazy. You have to be crazy to believe that there are still monsters living at the end of the 20th century. But they are out there. I've seen some. There are enough reports of these things coming in to prove that something still is out there.
Will they return from Australia having bagged their quarry? People are exposed to a continuous flood of stories, pictures, and impressions. Sometimes something like mirages creep in. I saw it, felt it, experienced it, but suddenly it's no longer there. One is hard-pressed to describe the mirage, which only compounds other people's disbelief. Behind it all, perhaps, lies a deep-seated human yearning for an awe-inspiring reality behind these phenomena. Each culture has its own monsters. In Western society, there are those found in movies, such as Jurassic Park. In Africa, there are the tales of Mukele Mbembe. Scientists have found an explanation for this, our genetic kinship to animals. Monsters are our remembrance of a prehistoric era. But what happens when you find size 61 footprints in the forests of the Rocky Mountains? Is that just the remembrance of a prehistoric time? This is a question that a scientist at the University of Washington is investigating. Professor Grover Krantz is the world's foremost expert on the topic of Sasquatch, the two-legged ape-like creature. Sasquatch is a Native American word and means something like wild man. It is also identical with the creature that we know under the popular name of Bigfoot. For 30 years now, Krantz has been researching this topic, searching for proof of the existence of the Sasquatch. He hasn't found it yet. Is there really a Sasquatch? The answer may be a matter of belief. For some people, stories of an ape-like monster are clearly fabrications. Others believe just as vehemently that there really is a hairy 8-foot-tall creature that walks on two legs. Since the end of the 1950s, when the first footprints were discovered, more than 2,000 encounters have been reported to authorities, and more than 3,000 eyewitnesses swear they have seen this daunting creature. One of them is Roger Patterson, who says he met a Sasquatch on October 20th, 1967. Patterson was quick to grab his film camera.
The Patterson film is one of the best pieces of evidence for the Sasquatch. And here you can see a stop frame where each frame is held for a few moments. And the way it walks is different from a human. It puts a foot down, the knees out straight. But when it puts its weight on, the knees stays bent and it lifts the foot very high behind. The weight bearing is still bent. The foot reaches out. And then the trailing foot again comes up very high. Always the body when it's supported on a bent knee, and when it moves away, the trailing foot is lifted very high up. This is not the way a human would walk, but it is the way an animal would walk if it was excessively heavy, very strong, and had feet that are disproportionately large.
Krantz has attempted to present detailed proof of the creature's existence in his book, Big Footprints, a scientific inquiry into the reality of Sasquatch. He has still to convince his doubters.
Well, getting more film is very difficult because most people, if they see one, if they have a camera, they forget about the camera. If they try to turn the camera on, they can't get it turned on in time. They usually see the creature for only a minute. Patterson saw this one for maybe 2 minutes. 1 minute fumbling and then 1 minute with the camera on. And also, films can be faked now much more easily than they could in the past. So if someone got a film, no one would believe it. The real evidence we need is bones of the animal. Preferably the skeleton of one that died a natural death, or, if necessary, one that was shot some time ago.
For years, it has been a daily routine for Professor Krantz to go out with his dog into the forest. And though it may seem a little ridiculous, he always has his rifle with him, loaded. He says he'd never forgive himself if this legendary creature were to appear to him. If he were yet another eyewitness whose breathless report of an encounter with the strange ape-like creature went something like this. Yes, I saw it. It had wide-open eyes that looked dully at me as if from a death mask. And I was frozen with fear. Just a few short seconds. And then the whole thing was over. If he should encounter Sasquatch, Professor Krantz wants to be able to place more on the scales than just the credibility of his words. Sometimes he begins to dream. He dreams that he is the hero. That finally he crowns his long years of research with a definitive, uniquely irrefutable piece of evidence. That then, all the slander and rejection that he has experienced for stubbornly holding on to his belief in the existence of the Sasquatch is forgotten and forgiven. Yes, he dreams that he finds the Sasquatch in the deep green forests of the Rocky Mountains, and kills him.
Now, exactly what the Sasquatch is, we don't know for sure. My best guess is that it is what's known as Gigantopithecus, and it is still alive today. So we know the Gigantopithecus from fossils, just lower jaws from China and one from India, and I think that they have survived until the present time. They are still located in Asia, and they have expanded into North America.
More and more reports come in from around the world of strange creatures walking upright. In North America, it is the Sasquatch or Bigfoot. In the Himalayas, it is the Yeti. And in Australia, it is the Yowie, a stinking monster. The story of the Yeti is more popular than ever. Since the Englishman B.H. Hodgson first reported in 1832 that his Nepalese bearers ran away when they saw an ape-like creature, a genuine run has developed on the exploration of Himalayan caves previously unentered by human beings. Mountain climbers and natural scientists comb the expanses of the largest and highest mountain ridge with all the latest equipment. They have tried for years to capture an image of the Yeti with self-releasing night-viewing cameras. But so far, they've got nothing more than a few yaks in front of their lenses. And then suddenly a monster stood in front of me, coming out of the woods, 7 feet tall, long shaggy hair, and on 2 legs. I didn't think of anything. I was only astonished. I didn't photograph or know what I was looking at. I couldn't think anymore. I stood frozen like a mouse before a snake. I only had cold shudders. Luckily, the animal ran away. Since that night, Messner has been trying to solve the mystery of the legend of the Yeti. Each of his expeditions into the Himalayas has brought him a step closer to the answer. In autumn of 1997, after photographing a stuffed animal, I was successful at finding a living animal sleeping on a plateau. And I waited until the animal, it was a young animal, woke up. The animal looked at me like a child looks at a stranger, even shook its head. It had something really human about it. And then it stood up on two legs and became serious. And then I said to myself, now it's going to attack. I was very tense then. And then it stood up all the way and seemed to consider what it was going to do. Luckily, it just went away. Far away. My educational work consisted of proving that the Tibetan bear is clearly behind this legend, as it is told in the Himalayas, the legend of the Yeti. Whether this answer will finally end all the fantastic stories about the Yeti is yet to be seen. I have great respect for cryptozoologists who discard all their prejudices and liberate themselves for the unknown, for the possible. But they also have to be prepared to deal with banality, because often we find a banal answer to questions and mysteries. Those who immerse themselves in the world of monsters, creatures, thrilling legends, and strange myths give their dreams and fantasies much room to expand. For them, the world often appears to be a place of tremendous mystery and wonder. The renowned cryptozoologist Richard Greenwald expresses the situation this way. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I'm totally convinced of the existence of these monsters. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, I can't possibly imagine that there actually are such creatures. Sundays, I say nothing, either for or against them. I just take a break.